With the assessments that I had online, I knew that it was a risk to introduce it into the class. I know that there are other instructors who teach the class that I teach who don't necessarily choose to use the online assessments. And I know that when students look at which class or which section they're going to be taking, they look at the syllabus, and I didn't want to scare anybody away with having too many tests or too many assessments. It was important to me to keep it a low stakes assessment process. I didn't want to have tests that were worth too much in the final grade and then make students nervous. I myself am often very nervous when taking tests, so I wanted to be sensitive about that when creating these tests. So one of my strategies for creating the assessments was to just make it very predictable. They're always due on the same day each week. There's just a couple of questions, so students can expect maybe 5 or 6 questions based on the materials that should have been read for that particular week. So no surprises. I'm not going to look back a couple of weeks and test their memory recall skills. It's more to make sure that they actually are performing the critical reading. I have used a couple of steps to make sure that it's a positive experience for the students and also to make sure that it's an accurate indicator of their knowledge of the subject. One of the real risks with online learning is trying to prevent cheating. And so, I really did research as far as what are some ways that you can reduce the instances of cheating with the online classes. So with the quizzes, what I didn't want was to create something that people could pass around or give to peers or students or give to my next section. So I tried to create assessments that were truly unique. One way to do this was I learned through Blackboard that you can create pools of questions. So that's really important for me. If I give a quiz on week 2, I might create 15 to 20 questions in a pool for that particular week, but then the student only sees 5 or 6 questions. So 2 students could sit next to each other but have completely different tests. Another way to reduce, hopefully, the instance of cheating would be to make it open book. So again, it's low stakes. I'm not asking them to do anything like memorization or anything that's high stress. They can have the materials in front of them, but I do put a time limit on the quiz. So if they have 30 minutes and they have 5 or 6 questions, some are short answer, they really need to know where to find that material. So if I'm asking about a particular topic or a particular concept, they need to know which article has that information. They can't be skimming through all the reading and looking at the question that's presented on the screen and then trying to backpedal and find the information. If they've done the reading, they should be finishing the quiz in really just a few minutes, knowing where they can find that information. And another important thing about reducing the instances of cheating, hopefully, is that I make it very clear to cover myself as an instructor that the students are expected to put forth individual work. So I don't want them working together. There's nothing I can do to prevent it. I can't go to their houses and make sure that they're not working with peers on these tests. But by making the statement in the instructions of the assessment that I expect that it's individual work and that anytime I ask them to define something, I want them to paraphrase or put it in their own words. This helps to make sure that they're not just parroting responses back to me, and it also helps to make sure that they're not copying off each other. So when I grade the quizzes or the tests, what I can do is go and look at each question and grade one question at a time. So I can look at the whole class and look at one particular question, and whoever had been presented with that question, I can look at those answers. And it becomes clear very quickly who has copied off each other, if at all. I'm happy to report that I've given tests to hundreds of students at this point, and I have only come up with 2 instances where I suspected students were collaborating on the work. And I worked with the department to do an investigation, and they had some disciplinary actions put forth, but for the most part it's been highly successful. it's a great way for me to see in real time, so to speak, who's understanding the concepts, who's getting lost. I don't have to wait for the essays to be due, which are a huge chunk of the grade, to know that there's a problem. Also with the quizzes and the tests, it gives the students real-time feedback. So I'm always trying to engage with the students. A lot of times they might email me questions or post things on the water cooler page of the discussion board. I try to give detailed feedback when they submit essays. I check and turn it in to make sure that they're looking at the feedback. If I see that they've not looked at the feedback, I send them an email to prompt them to look at the feedback. So I try to do everything I can to make sure that I'm engaging with the student. But the quizzes have an added benefit because the students take the quiz and they're given that instant feedback of whether they did well on the quiz or whether they need to maybe explore the concepts further. So they are getting this mechanism for feedback instantly, immediately after taking the test, and they can get that feedback to know if they're getting the concepts or not. And that helps me. It's like my shadow. I'm able to program in answers and feedback when the answers are correct and when they're incorrect, so the students can learn from their mistakes. And hopefully they'll learn from their mistakes, and then they can incorporate the concepts correctly into the larger essays that are due as part of the class.